In the new movie, The Current War, Oscar nominee Benedict Cumberbatch goes toe-to-toe with Oscar nominee Michael Shannon. They play Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse as they fight to be the first to light up the world with their inventions. Let's take a look at a little bit from the film.
What a roaring silence from the brightest minds of America.
He's using Hiram's design.
Which Hiram stole from me! Sue him.
We already did. The court upheld his
I'm
patent.
talking about Westinghouse. Find an angle.
Take a trip to Barrington and see for yourself.
You don't even slightly irked that 15 years of work is being filched from right under your eyes. Not again. I build a system here. And you go shopping for patents to cobble together something to legally steal what is mine. If the bulbs are a battle, then nail them on the dynamos.
We can't.
Adding to that electricity is Tuppence Middleton, who plays Thomas Edison's wife, Mary. Benedict and Tuppence join me now. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I have plenty of questions of my own for you both, but that was our invisible studio audience welcoming you out here. I have a lot of questions for you both because I've seen this film, but when I tweeted that you were coming on the show, I got the most overwhelming response from fans. So I wanted to start out with a two-part question from one of them. This comes from Jan H., who tweeted, Benedict, what are your thoughts on the historical significance of Edison and his legacy to the world?
How long have you got? Did he leave the world a better place than the one he found? I don't know, but he worked incredibly hard. He lived an extraordinary life and discovered, developed through wonder and intrigue, the most extraordinary advances in technology in his time, the phonograph, advances in the telegraph, telegrammatic communication, and first ever recorded and playback sound in the phonograph. I mean, the first time that anybody had ever heard themselves and been able to record themselves, and what that did for, as he advertised it, oral history for certain disabilities, for recording a dying loved one's last words, to just mucking around or recording indigenous folk songs or lore or stories and oral history, huge. And then the motion picture camera itself. But he also operated through, I think, fear and a certain degree of protectionism due to his tough upbringing and what he fought to garner and maintain, and also through his severe hearing disability. He was quite stuck in his ways, a needle in a haystack kind of guy. And despite inventing also the research and development department at Menlo Park and being very collaborative, he could really close off and see everyone as competition. And I often think, especially with the tragedy of this story, what could have been if he'd allied with Westinghouse and, of course, Tesla, the true sort of 100-year into the future visionary, whereas Westinghouse and Edison were a mere sort of decade ahead of their time. This guy was like 100 years ahead of his time. And I think of the missed opportunity of that, and that's the sort of takeaway lesson. It's better to work together and strive for some common advancements than necessarily lauding yourself as being the greatest inventor of all time, the one with the largest number of patents. But he did do great things. He just didn't always do them in a great way, I think is the kind of catchphrase of that.
Watching the film definitely reminded me of all the things that I take for granted now that are his inventions. Well, I do want to get to the second part of this question from Jan H. Tuppence, it's for you. And Jan said, what are your thoughts on the comparison between the portrayal of Mary Edison in this film and in real history?
Well, I don't know if there's much comparison to be made because there's not a lot written about Mary. Of course, because Thomas was the genius and the inventor and has a huge legacy, and Mary was essentially a wife who was very private and had a very short life and stayed at home with her children. I mean, they met when she was working for Edison at 16, but then she soon gave up working, went to look after her kids. So really, we had a lot of artistic license, so we could kind of create her from scratch, which was really nice. So I really only had the script to go on. And not that much research, really.
Well, you mentioned an artistic license. So Benedict, how do you formulate the kind of obsessiveness that Edison had over his work? And also, how do you formulate the personality of a historical figure like him? I
mean, a lot of the heavy lifting done by Michael Mitnick, who wrote this fantastic script, this blacklisted script, and also by Alfonso for sort of elevating the extraordinary with the ordinary, with the human, the things that we can all relate to amongst these sort of genii, I guess. And just doing a lot of research, I had the sort of opposite problem in the sense that there's a huge legacy. This guy's a sort of American icon. And who am I as a British actor to come along and try and crack that one? It was one of the challenges, one of the lures of the job, I guess. And it's always about delving for something that gives a truth on a moment-by-moment basis, because the story itself is invigorating enough. I think you've got to care about the cast of real characters in it. And so how do you do that without it being a takedown? How do you do that without it vanillifying or kind of, skirting over the edges of a character that didn't always do palatable things in the modern light? And I think a key for me was understanding his deafness actually was a huge deal for me. And we don't make a big deal of it in the film. He's not someone who leans on it, but I think it did just really colour his character in a massive degree, psychologically as well as physically. He used it to his advantage. He would literally cut off to blank out any kind of distraction, to have a kind of white noise and just focus on the internal solving of a solution. Finding of a solution, solving a problem. And then I think it cost him psychologically, in the sense that in that isolation, he would often not be able to hear the sense coming from others. And so that fascinated me, that there was a vulnerability that created this fear, this protectionism, this really dirty tricks campaign that the current war became. He electrocuted animals to prove the dangers of the AC Westinghouse current. He called it Westinghousing, rather than before electrocution was a term invented. He also designed the electric chair in order to, again, besmirch his opponent's name in this war for control over the distribution of electricity, by pointing out that it was so dangerous as to take a human life, and here it is doing that, performing that function through capital punishment. I mean, really, that was one of the most sort of dark revelations for me. I was really shocked by that. No pun intended, but so it was to get to what would drive a man to that level of obsession. And I think that fear, bolstered by his difficulties, was what I found as a motivation there.
Now, this film was originally set to be released by the Weinstein Company, but postponed, of course, because of the allegations against him. And we have a tweet from Emily who wanted to know, what was the waiting process like? Did you think it was still going to be released after 2 years?
Yeah, we all hoped it would. The legal battles over the ownership of the material and how it should be distributed, and that sadly it came out as not Alfonso's film in the UK, and we're all struggling to deal with that because it's another sort of crying shame in a saga that had a lot of difficulties. But I think what's great and why we're here is to support Alfonso. This is his film. Not a film that was originally wrestled away from him and turned into something else that was just not the intention of him as a filmmaker. And he's a really fine auteur. He's a brilliant cineast, and all of his detail, his knowledge, his skill and his craft is on display here, as it was in Mielo and Dying Girl. Very different canvas, but he loves film, and there's so much that's celebrating that within this movie. And to celebrate it, to do with all the electricians, the actual electricians who worked on the film, and all the other technicians behind the camera, the English crew, and the rest of the cast that worked so hard to get this made. It's great that it's had a life, so we're thrilled to be here. I can't speak for Tuppence, but
No, meanwhile everyone was working behind the scenes in the past 2 years to make it as good as it could possibly be, and Alfonso was recutting all the time, and we filmed some additional photography, new scenes, and it became a very different film. So there was always the intention that it would come out and it would be Alfonso's cut. So I think it was great that everyone was so passionate about it, and we got there in the end.
Tuppence, I first became familiar with your work through Sense8, which is a show that is just so, I think, lauded for its various kinds of representation on screen, and just having such a compelling story, and I mean, many storylines. What do you think was really like the pull for fans? Like, did the representation aspect of it really help make people feel so devoted and really outspoken about it?
Yeah, I think it's really important that people see themselves represented on screen, and I think that that's one of the shows that I think does that better than any other, and was one of the original shows to do that kind of confidently and with such creativity. And I think that, again, it was one of those projects where there was a lot of love and compassion. People really wanted to tell those stories, and that's reflected back in the fans, I think.
Benedict, we had Elizabeth Olsen on the show recently, and she made news because she wanted an all-female Marvel film. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, bring it. Why not? There's space for that, definitely. You know, we're seeing the rise of the female superhero, and why not?
Yeah.
Be great.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about some of your other work, too. In the film Brexit, The Uncivil War, you portrayed Dominic Cummings, who infamously advocated for Britain to leave the EU. The deadline for Brexit was next week. Now it appears there's a delay. Do y'all have any predictions? What are you thinking about all of this?
I don't know.
Your guess is as good as ours.
Yeah, it really is at this point. Everything has happened and has been changed and moved and shifted and debated and allied with and broken down and discussed and brokered and voted against and voted for. It's an unholy mess is what it is.
Yeah.
A mad riddle, as Danny Dyer said. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I checked out your IMDb page, and it says you have 13 upcoming projects.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. So I wasn't surprised when I got this tweet from another fan who said, if you could ask him about any of his other projects that have been in development for a while, such as Rio, Rogue Mail, How to Stop Time, his fans have been looking forward to those, and the suspense is killing us. So is there anything you can tell me about those?
Just enjoy the ones that I'm working on. I appreciate the support, but, you know, I do work quite hard, and the stuff we've got coming out is pretty fantastic.
Tuppence, you just had the Downton Abbey film. Is there anyone in Hollywood you're really looking forward to working with?
There's lots of people I'd love to work with. I don't know if I'm going to work with them. I'm about to start shooting David Fincher's new film, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. What can you tell us about that?
Not much.
Okay. All right. We'll just have to stay tuned. Well, listen, thank you both so much for joining me. It was really great getting to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The Current War, starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Tuppence Middleton, is in theaters now. There's more AMCDM coming up.